everybody, and welcome to our first Mervless Gamescast in the Avocado Gamescast history. I'll be your host today. It is the Kappa, and with me today I've got Lord Stoneheart.
Hello.
I've got Bresson,
Hey,
and making his first podcast appearance, we've got LittleMac.
Hello, folks. And I'm just going to point out here, we've never seen Merv and myself in the same podcast at the same time. So,
You gotta have that. You gotta have that Merv energy of Canadian, but also United States, but also very into the weeb culture. So it's a hard act to follow. So Merv's just got some stuff going on, nothing too serious, but he's gonna take a couple breaks. So we're gonna try to keep the podcast rolling for a little bit without him. I'll try to fill in best I can. I know I can't live up to it because every time people are like, "Oh, Merv, such a great voice. Sound so good on the podcast," and it's like, good editing, Kappa. So we've got to start out with it kind of in honor of just keeping the podcast rolling. We do have now rolling into 2021, no longer 2020, Sonic Watch to start out with. So there was a Sonic Direct. Looks like there's a new 3D Sonic game on its way, coming out on basically all the major systems, and it's sure Sonic. I don't know if anybody else saw it. It looks like it's on its way, but still kind of
it's
still
kind of
Sonic.
looks like colors. That's like my main impression of it.
hmm Yeah, it's weird because I think a lot of people have struggled with Sonic in a lot of different ways. What made Sonic popular? What made Sonic fun? Things like that. And it looks like kind of the answer has just been people just are looking for platformers in some ways, right? But I don't know. We'll see what the 3D Sonic ends up being, I guess. Um, so let's move on quickly because I don't want to talk about Sonic any more than I have to, or I'm contractually obligated, I guess. Um, what have you guys been playing? Start with Bresson.
Oh yeah, I've been playing like a very Australian game. I've
Uh-oh.
been playing Golf Story on the Switch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a replay, honestly, and it's like still an extremely fun game. It was like one of those weird semi-indie launch titles they had for the Switch, if I
hmm
recall correctly. It's like an RPG light golf game. It's very arcadey also. It has like a multiplayer mode, but the story mode is about you like getting the clubs of your dead dad and then trying to get to the top of the golf game. But there's like a lot of wacky characters. You need to go to several courses. It's like all into the you go like visit cavemen and you go like visit like an island like invaded with birds
Yeah.
and you try to become the best golfer.
This
It's a
this
lot of
game,
fun.
yeah, it
Hmm?
was inescapable around launch. I
Yeah,
I think it might have been the best Switch game for a while. That was probably
yeah,
not a Nintendo first party, right? Um,
yeah.
really does a good job of using the Switch itself to kind of like enhance the game and everything. Now, I've played a couple mobile games that kind of have a similar idea to it, but I think the golf background game adds a lot to it, right? Like it's not super in-depth golf sim, right? It's kind
No,
of a
no, no,
yeah.
not
no.
at all. It's very pick up and play. That's like the fun part, but it's surprisingly hard. It's like you need to like calculate with wind and with like how the golf course lays because it sometimes like goes like 50 degrees to the left because somebody like plays it like on a fucking hill or something.
Yeah.
It's very wacky. It's very Australian in humor. It's like it's kind of like dark humor that's also like very funny and light at moments,
Mhm.
but sometimes it keeps like making jokes about like old people dying and you keep like you go like one of the courses is like built on a former graveyard which is now affected by ghosts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And in one of the stages you go like to like find some people who have like frozen in and there's like a golf mafia running around stealing balls
You know,
and like the track is like littered with people frozen in blocks of ice and you need to get like a fireball from a blacksmith to hit them with them and then they give you quests. It's very very funny.
I you know,
Yeah. One
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One thing that I really, really loved when I played Golf Story a few years ago was how the golf mechanic and the RPG mechanic collide because
Hmm.
all the side quests are solved with golf.
Yeah.
Like like this getting the people out of the ice blocks. You need a magical ball that you can hit and hit the ice blocks. It's never like find a heat lamp to be able to take
Yeah,
out.
I
Yeah.
love the mechanism with RPGs where the actual combat is not turn-based combat. Like I think about like stuff like Puzzle Quest. That was a thing for a while, where you would have an RPG, but really how you combated each other was by doing like a sliding Tetrisy type game or something. Um, Golf kind of had its moment for a while. You remember Hot Shots Golf when that was a thing
Mm.
Yeah.
for a while. It seems like that was that one though. I think where they missed with that was that humor and that setting was very like Japanese based. I remember it being. I think that probably has a little bit more, juice out there. I think that's kind of more of a preferred genre there. But adding the RPG element to it, I think, has been a genius idea.
No,
Um,
no, not really. Like I recall like various humorous golf games like from American publisher, like Golf with Friends.
mhm,
You had like Dangerous Golf, like that collision game.
sure.
Remember that?
Well,
That that
which
had like an horrible launch, but it turned out to be pretty okay.
yeah, Golf with Friends must have came out right before Golf Story, right? Kind of right around the
Yeah,
same time. Yeah. Yeah, I remember it came out later to all the consoles and stuff, but yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a golf rebirth for the genre going on right now. I think maybe it's because we don't see many sports games outside of the big Maddens and NBAs and NHLs these days, right? So I think there
yeah.
is still like a push to play sports games. And I think golf is just a real natural fit for something that people kind of get on the surface, and you can have a lot of fun with it.
And it's one of those sports that the method that they came up with like in the earliest golf games for how it was going to play is so intuitive
Hmm.
that it pretty much carries like there are probably some golf games I imagine because I haven't played them all that you could pick up and wouldn't immediately intuitively understand. Press the button at the top of the stroke, press the button, and then when it comes back down, press the button a third time.
Right, right. Like I
But
mean,
but generally,
yeah, it's a very like mechanical procedure. Once you've played one golf game, you probably can pick up and play most other them, right? Just watch the little swing meter and you're good to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I remember like the Xbox and PlayStation 2 launching with like a shit ton of golf games also. Like, you had like that hillbilly golf game, like I don't even know what it's called. It was kind of like Jackass based.
Oh yeah, Outlaw
Pretty
Golf.
horrible.
I think it was called Outlaw Golf, and it was
Yeah,
supposed to be
Outlaw
like
Golf. Yeah.
edgy. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like pure like 2002 Johnny Knoxville rides a fucking golf car into a wall
yeah.
energy.
The only reason I remember that one, and it's in the top of my mind, is I think Steve Carell does
Yeah.
the announcing. It was just so weird. Like, Steve, he was a pretty clean comedian at that time. He's like a Family Guy type thing, and yeah, it was like a just really edgy golf game. I thought that was hilarious, but
Yeah, like Second City people have been like in games all the fucking time. There's like this 90s pinball game that
mhm.
has like all their voices in it and stuff.
Yeah.
People like Tina Fey were in it. It was really weird.
All right, so Little Mac, what you've been playing?
I've been playing actually a lot of different things, but to boil it down to one, I think the game that's been occupying me the most lately has been Ring Fit Adventure.
Oh man,
Oh yeah,
this is a
yeah.
game of a year on the podcast nominee, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's quite a game.
Should
I
have been mine also. Because, yeah, I've been still playing it and it's like literally keeping me fit. Yeah, I've lost like several kilos like playing it and cutting into my diet because it's like so much fun, but also like really nails the training, but
Mhm.
also the fun part of it.
how
Yeah,
perfect of a timing for it too. Like the start of a pandemic, you come out with a fitness game,
Yeah,
yeah. It's almost. I'm happy that I got into it now because just it's fitting really well into my life right now. But 2 Christmases ago, it was on my Christmas list when it had just come out. And that was the Christmas where on Christmas morning my mother said, "So I decided you're too old for video games, so I didn't get you any of the games you." And And then the pandemic came, and it was like, well, Mom, the joke's on you, because now now your son is going to die several years earlier than he was.
You could have saved me, but you didn't.
Sedentary for months now. But so I started trying to kind of turn my fitness around earlier in the year. And then when I got my final grades in, I teach at a university. So you can imagine the winter semester was just a nightmare with the online teaching. So when I finally got those grades in, I looked up and it was like, well, it's been illegal to leave the house, and so I've got a whole bunch of money just sitting around. So I'm getting this game for myself, even though it's more expensive than a normal game. It arrived, and I love it. It does a really impressive job of, like Bresson was saying, of merging the fitness app aspect with the game aspect. It's not like Wii Fit, where there were like some arcade side games you could play, but then it was mostly just, using this balance board to try to do basic exercises.
Yeah.
This is a game that you play with exercise that then also has a whole bunch of arcadey side mini games in it. So it all comes together very well. It has charming, hilarious dialogue, as which is basically standard for Nintendo by this point with their localizations. And I'm not through the main adventure yet, but it's starting to sort of really develop the backstory of the relationship between the villain, who is he's called Drago, and he's like a big buff dragon man. He serves as an embodiment of toxic fitness culture.
And you beat him with hip thrust, right? Isn't that the?
Yes.
I remember that meme.
Your pal, the magical Pilates ring who can talk. But then the two of them have a backstory relationship that keeps getting little crumbs dropped, and there's a surprising amount of depth to the relationship between this
nice
personified object and giant guy. So it's a ton of fun. If I don't really have any complaints, except that I wish at this point, because I'm pretty deep into the game, there was a way to increase the difficulty of the video game part.
Yeah.
Because I'm a real side quest guy. So you throw a bunch of side quests at me, I'm going to go do them, and you give me these arcade mini games, and I'm going to get S rank before I move on.
Yeah.
And so eventually, now I'm so high leveled that I don't change my gear anymore, because as long as I perform the exercises, even if I'm not performing the one that the enemy is weak against, I'm going to beat most enemies with one attack.
Yeah.
So that part is mildly disappointing, because when you turn the difficulty up in the game, it makes the exercise harder.
Not the game part.
Yeah, that's
you got to do more reps. And
that's interesting.
That's what I did, because I'm like, my cardio was too shit. But before, I used to weightlift and do stuff like that. So yeah, my strength is on another level than it normally puts on, because I started playing it and I was beating levels way too easy. It's not like an humble drag, but I was getting bored. I put it on harder, and it's ripping my ass apart. It's insane. I'm playing at level 12 or something. I don't know the skill at my end, but it's extremely hard. But it's also really rewarding.
Yeah, I think I'm at difficulty level 26 right now, I think. And so it's got to the point, because mostly what it does when you increase the difficulty, it just turns up the number of reps. So now I have to listen to the chipper, the ring voice go, 30 left. And the voice that he'll say, 5 left. And you're like, shut the fuck up.
I started a new.
Got over the hump with 30 more of these to go.
I started a new game because I beat it, and it's the first level I started with 70 reps for every exercise. And the funny part is it has a Dutch dub, and the ring is done by the voice of a very famous mascot of a Dutch theme park. And it's the worst. It's extremely high spirited, kid cartoon, let's go, yeah, you did it, woo! And that's all the fucking time. And then you meet Drago, and he's speaking in these weird semi-crunchy 8-bit vocals.
Does Drago speak in the European version?
No. He makes these weird grumbly 8-bit vocals.
Yeah. I thought that was an odd choice to fully voice the ring, but then not voice the villain. But
So it's just this much at this point. This might be the most successful fitness game probably that I've ever heard of, at least, right? I mean, I've heard very good things about it, but this was always a little bit of Nintendo's dream, right? They've been pushing
Yeah.
fitness for a long time, and it's interesting that
Yeah.
this one's, I mean, maybe right time, right place, right game, right system. Everything kind of fell in place. I think where this
Yeah.
is maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is like the first game because the balance board did very well at
Mhm.
being like a fitness app. It was pretty acclaimed for that also. But like, yeah, it wasn't a fun game. It didn't
Yeah,
have like really mini games and stuff.
yeah, I would say fitness plus game is probably where this one's successful. I know that Microsoft did a bunch with their Connect things. I
Yeah,
think Sony had a couple things with those little ice cream cones. But this seems like this is the one where they kind of finally all got it right. So maybe this is a new trend. Maybe they run with this one. You know?
Yeah, well now it's got me. I saw on Indiegogo there's a company trying to make a game where it's like the resistance band boxing training gear. If you're
Mm,
familiar with that, you kind of put it on yourself so it's
yeah.
restraining your fist when you punch. They're making a video gamified version of that.
Ah,
So you're gonna like it's like a boxing RPG,
jeez.
and so it's like $300 to back it. But now I'm like, if they're shipping it at the end of the year, like I'll probably be done with Ring Fit by then. Am I
Yeah.
gonna just get out of shape now? Because like going for a jog is horrifically boring when there's no adventure attached to it.
All
It
right.
might be the start of a renaissance. The
Yeah.
last thing I want to say before we move on
Sure.
is I totally played myself yesterday because there's this mini game Crate Crasher that you
oh
play
god,
by
yeah.
squeezing the ring rapidly to produce puffs of air. And I was at the advanced version, and I was like, I want to get the S, I want to get the S, and I eventually gave up because like my arms were getting exhausted. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go do the boss level, and then I'm done. So when I go to the boss, like my arms are tired now, so I'm gonna bring all legs, abs, yoga skills, and then I get into the level, and it turned out the course leading up to the boss was just a gauntlet of the windmill doors that you open by rapidly. So when I got my readout of my performance for the day at the end of my gaming day, I had done 1,193 ring press reps.
Oh,
my
wow.
god.
Like my shoulders are a little, my triceps are a little sore today, but yeah, fun game.
All right, Lord Stoneheart, what you've been playing?
On the PS4, I've been playing Nier Automata.
Oh yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. Wow,
Yeah,
this is like the greatest hits of last year so far, kind of. You guys.
I think it's
Clear in the back.
2017.
Yeah, I think it's 17, but it
Yeah.
was remastered
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah,
but
last
It's
year
the
was.
Japanese version, right?
I think so. That was like when the complete version or something came out, I think. But yeah, I remember Nier is much beloved, I would say, by most folks that aren't the
I
Kappa.
love it.
How you finding it?
Uh, so so it's more like an action RPG, which is not my strength, but
Mhm.
I feel like I'm getting better at it. I have been spoiled a little bit on I don't really know. I haven't been spoiled on the story, but I do know that the main character that you start out as, the android 2B,
Mhm.
she's not the sole. I know she's not the sole playable character, but she's the only one that's been available to me so far. Um, but I feel like I feel like I've gotten better at it as it goes along, and it's been helpful that unlike other action RPGs I've tried lately, you pretty much always have you pretty much have like a constant ranged weapon that you can fire at all times,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and some bosses are immune to it, which throws me off, but I've if comparing it to like when I tried to play Dark Souls back in 2014, I I I I, I find I'm making much more progress.
Yeah, and how are you playing it more as a game, or are you playing it more as like the RPG? Are you taking your time with it? Like, what's kind of working for you with it?
So I know there's a lot of side quests that I think you're expected to do to level up and such. but I haven't been like actively seeking. I've been
Hmm.
kind of like hyper focused on the main story because I really want to see where it goes. His there was one like there's some things that like I kind of have a feeling like where it was going with, but there's a lot of things, a lot of like developments and stories that just sort of catch me off guard, and that really different than um other video games, especially everything with the robots Adam and Eve.
Hmm.
Those cutscenes were pretty weird.
Yeah, it gets a
Yeah.
little philosophical, right? Like a little bit more like,
Yeah, yeah.
what is
Like
it to be
it
a
begins with
human?
it begins with 2B being a little philosophical, and then at the end of a little speech, he's just like, and that's why if I meet the person who created this world, I want to kill them. I feel like there's a genre of JRPGs where like, that it just really sums it up there.
Yeah, yeah, like it's like if you ever introduce like a church or like a pope in any JRPG, they're gonna be bad, right? Like that's
Oh yeah,
always kind of one of those ideas.
almost all of them.
So,
I think. Well, yeah, I can't think of like exceptions right off the top of my head in JRPGs except for mm, maybe the Trails games, but also I haven't played enough of the Trails games
mm.
to really know if how the church factors into that.
Well, what I've been playing is a little game called Maneater. Okay, so I don't know how much y'all have heard about Maneater, but it feels like such a throwback of a game to me in a lot of ways. Like it's the kind of game I could actually see myself playing like at an arcade almost. Um, it's a game where you play a shark that just needs to eat stuff. That's pretty much it. There's collectibles. There's a really genius kind of like framing device of there being a reality TV show about a guy who kills sharks for a living, um, voiced by Chris Parnell as the narrative guy or like the narrator to the reality show. Uh, in the beginning of the game, a shark kills your mom, cuts you out of the shark as a little baby shark, and then marks you, then throws you into the freshwater where actually you can magically live because you're a special shark and you just have to go eat stuff to get really big and get your revenge on the guy who killed your mother. But man, is it a fun game. The controls are take a little bit to get used to because you're piloting in that kind of like 3D space of water, right? So you can go up, down, left, right a little bit. Um, the biting mechanic is a little bit weird. There's like a lot of tap versus hold type things with the biting. But once you get rolling with it, it's a real fun arcadey type game. I'm playing it on Game Pass, which isn't costing me nothing, which is nice. So I've been really enjoying just kind of jumping in and figuring out how would a shark take on an alligator or a barracuda, and then kind of getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually having to take on. I think you kill whales, just ridiculous stuff. And you perform all these like dodge rolls and jumping out of the water, and you're eating people off boats, and it's very violent, but kind of that like stylized violence, where you're just a shark with an attitude type thing. So feels like a game that I would have played a lot more in the 90s. And then I remember I did play a Jaws video game. And it was one of the worst games I ever played in my life.
Yeah, it's like
Jaws for
Oh, for the was it NES?
Yes.
Ah,
It was awful, awful, awful. I think there was also another shark game that came out not too long ago, but I think it was kind of like more of like a maybe like an arena shooter type thing where one person was the shark and four people. I didn't check it out much, but um, for a little like bite-sized arcade game, to kind of throw on and just kill some time and eat some people off boats. I really do enjoy it. And it's not a 10 out of 10 game. I know that. It's like a 7-ish out of 10 or something type game, but uh I think one of the things that I noticed really easily or early is that you have to pay a lot of attention to how different things attack you, especially the alligators early on. They all have different moves. They do rolls, they jump back, they hit you with their tail. So you're almost learning like each enemy as you come up to it. I don't want to say Dark Souls, but kind of that feel to it, where you have to like you meet a new enemy. It's like, okay, how does this one try to attack me or get at me? And then eventually you're learning the patterns, and it's like, oh, another alligator. Um, but Yeah, I really am enjoying Maneater, and it puts the song in my head every time I fire it up. So that's a nice little plus. But yeah, pretty decent. I think they call it a shark PG. Get it?
Yeah, it just reminds me of Jaws Unleashed.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I said like before, like, yeah, the Xbox game. That game was pretty good, but it
Hmm.
was really janky.
Hmm.
So if they like updated that, yeah, I'm up for that. But it's like only a PS5 game so far, if I recall
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, I think one of my favorite games growing up was a game called Evo. Do you remember that one? Where you start
Ooh,
Yeah.
out as a little
yes.
fish and you eat more and you get more DNA points and it lets you get into a bigger fish or put on a horn or things like that. And eventually you go all the way to, I don't remember where it stops. I think there was an ice wall that was broken and I never could get past it. But um, it reminds me a lot of that kind of a game. Like, you're evolving and you're gaining abilities and they're ridiculous. Don't get me wrong. I mean, your shark can do like backflips out of the water while it's covered in bone that deflects bullets. But but it's that kind of idea. Like, okay, eat, get stronger, grow, adapt. It does feel RPG-ish to me, kind of in a smart way, where you're bonding with your shark on his mission to basically kill this evil jerk, while Chris Parnell narrates over the game in real kind of snarky reality host manners. Because in his mind, you're the bad guy, right? So you're this evil shark going around eating everybody. Yeah, I guess you are the bad guy, but you got your reasons. So-
Well, a friend of mine just loves sharks so much, and like her political cause is constantly sharing memes to try to educate people about how sharks don't actually kill humans that much. We shouldn't be killing. I gotta tell her about this game because
yeah, she's gonna love it. And the
she would
evil,
have no time connecting to the perspective that the shark is.
the bad guy's named Salty Pete, and he lives up to it. He's like a Cajun, like those croc hunter shows where they go around and like the crocs aren't really hurting anybody, but they're just shooting them in the head and whatever. I guess they're performing some type of service, but that's kind of his role, except he's out there just killing sharks because they might be bad. And then you're actually the shark that everybody says should be there. So fun game. I mean, it's an inch deep in terms of a lot of stuff, but I'm really enjoying it. So, I guess that's what we're playing. Let's talk a little bit about something else real quick. And I don't want to get too in depth because I have a feeling we will be digging into this really soon. But a couple of E3 previews and leaks have hit lately. This is evolving. By the time the podcast actually hits, we'll have a lot more. But I think maybe there was two or three that we wanted to talk about real quick. Bresson, I think you wanted to mention one. I think that just came out today, right? A trailer just came out today as of, what is it, the 6th?
Yeah, the 6. It came out yesterday, I think. It's for the Vertigo game, which is officially licensed from the Alfred Hitchcock estate.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of looks like one of those semi-indie titles Xbox puts out. Like, there's no gameplay, there's only like a stylish trailer.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks pretty good. It's like a lot of black and red. It's like the movie itself. And honestly, Vertigo makes for a pretty interesting game.
Yeah.
Because it's like all about being chased and being afraid of things that might be there or might not be there. And just like dealing with your own angst. And it's like you can easily make you can switch it like a lot of ways. You can do like a Super Meat Boy kind of game where you like jump around and try to escape like your fears. Or you can do like a puzzle game where you try to find clues like what is causing this distress to you. You can do like a lot of it.
You
Yeah, it
know,
looks interesting for
what
sure.
the art style first is gorgeous. I love that kind of
Yeah,
look.
it's
It
really cool.
looked very cool. It kind of has that feeling a little bit to me of like a Telltale looking game. Like,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, I'm sure it's not that, but if I had to like kind of guess a frame of reference for what I would expect this game to be when I played it, I think that Telltale kind of feel. But what really nailed it for me in that trailer was that kind of like final scene where they put that vertigo from the movie effect over the character's eyes to kind of mimic,
Yeah.
the I don't know, panic or whatever. I was like, okay, yeah, this feels really cool. But it looks like they're kind of running with a lot of Hitchcock influences, which is man, if the world of video games can start mining some real classic cinema, I think we're all probably for that. Depending on how good you can make it. But I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty fertile ground to look at some of that stuff.
I think it's also by the guys who did like Garfield Cards
Mhm.
and the recent god awful XIII remaster.
Oh yeah, oof, yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh, Garfield Cards is pretty fun.
yeah,
He
yeah.
also
That
did the
was a sleeper hit.
Siberia games, which I really like, but also are like pretty janky.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be interesting.
Yeah, the one I wanted to mention was the XCOM slash Marvel game. This to me has me excited on a million different levels. One, I can't believe we haven't had a good Marvel game since. Geez, I mean, I don't want to count Spider-Man. That's kind of its own thing, right? But like going outside of that, maybe Hulk Ultimate Destruction, Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I don't know. It's been dry out there for fans of Marvel games, right?
Marvel vs. Capcom. I don't know
Oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah,
the
that might
most
work.
recent version of that, but it's. I think the latest came out like 8 years ago or something.
Mm. It's just been, I mean, it's been weird that like the driving force of our cinema is so perfect for video games, and yet like what we got that really horrible Avengers game, and that's about it, right? That thing, people are probably like, oh yeah, that exists, right as I said that. um, but yeah, I don't know. I think XCOM is a very good template to put Marvel characters in because you do have to figure out how to make it feel dangerous to be the Hulk or Captain America or things like that. And XCOM always has a good sense of dread. What's around the next corner? What's going to happen? Things like that. So I think you can ratchet the tension up a little bit there. I think everybody's wanted Marvel Ultimate Alliance for a while now, and this might be kind of that step towards it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's potential there to do something cool with that idea, right?
Yeah.
Anything
Definitely.
else, Stoneheart or LittleMac, that you guys want to talk about as far as E3 leaks go?
Honestly, nothing concrete yet. What I'm most excited about, and it's a vague leak. It's kind of the announcement of an announcement or the hint of an announcement coming. But I want to hear more about Elden Ring.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
Elden
what were
Ring,
you more info about?
Elden Ring.
Yeah. Oh, so is it just like a rumor that there'll be more stuff on it at E3?
Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I mean, I hope so at this point, right? Like, what was it announced about 2 years ago now, right?
It was announced at E3 2019,
Oh, yeah.
Nope.
It would be nice to
and
hear something then.
according to Wikipedia here, it began development in early 2017.
Wow.
George R. R. Martin is involved. So they're actually progressing very rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, but still, a 4-year development cycle is not exactly, we should probably be hopefully seeing a little bit of gameplay, right? I think even in 2019, it was literally just like, it was like just the logo type trailer. I can't remember 100%,
I
but
feel like there's been a shot of just like a dude on horseback in a field or something, but
mhm.
I could even just be imagining that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like something that would be in it. So, yeah, it's weird. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff that can come out of that series, and you know, you put together probably I would say that the most exciting action RPG series and studio running with the best fantasy writer that we've got going. Maybe, I mean, I guess that's up to date too, but man, I gotta think people are interested in it because for me, it's been hard to get into the Souls game, and honestly, what's held me back a lot of times is I don't really dig the story or the plot when it kind of they go together. But I know there's a lot of environmental storytelling and stuff, but a lot of times it just feels like, okay, you know, I go kill these bad dudes because they're bad dudes and they're there to be killed. I think that the whole series would be really interesting to see updated with something that resembles like an RPG story like that kind of, beginning, middle, end, reasons, motivations, characters, stuff like that. So this is probably the most excited about a From Software game I've ever been personally. So it doesn't surprise me that people want to see more, and hopefully we do at this point.
Mhm.
Anything on your
Agreed.
end, Stoneheart?
E3, I think that I think um that was one of the main things I was wondering if we'd hear about. that's the things I'm hoping to hear about. I figure we won't because it's probably still a few years out, but I'm always hoping that like E3 that there's something about a new like this six Elder Scrolls game.
Oh yeah,
The
Starfield, or I think
or
it's gonna be.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not like anytime soon though.
It's going to be interesting to see what Microsoft does with Bethesda, right? I mean, everybody knows that Bethesda games, long dev cycles, when they come out, they're not always 100% ready for prime time. But now that Microsoft's kind of got that money behind it and behind them, I'm going to be interested to see kind of what it does in terms of their development time and how the game comes out at launch. I mean, I'm not expecting it to be flawless because, yeah, I mean, you know,
The type like the type of games they make it's inevitable that you'll get some kinks. I
right.
mean, there's always gonna be
Yeah.
kinks and bugs. Like the wide open world, there's always a chance for a bit more buggy. But hopefully, hopefully with the Microsoft merger, it's less so than the roughness of Skyrim at the start.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, I think I'm very forgiving of Bethesda games for the most part because to me they're so ambitious. Well, Bethesda as in Fallout and Skyrim, right? Or Fallout and Elder
Yeah.
Scrolls. I'm forgiving because they're trying to do a lot of things. And for everybody who says, "Oh, they just need to make a new engine, they need to do this, they need to do that," like when they say, "No, we don't really," because this engine does so many things behind the scenes perfectly that people just don't understand. When you're talking about graphics, that's one thing, right? But I mean, the creation engine is bonkers for the stuff that it does for AI, for things like, routines in the game. And, you can steal an item in the city and move it over here and put it in a house over here. And, that's very rare in a video game, right? Like, think about how many times you can pick up an item in a game, move it to another place and put it there, and the item stays there. That's there aren't a lot of engines that do that, right? So um, it'll be interesting to see kind of what they do technically, but also, I mean, I'm interested. I'm ready for something more in Elder Scrolls. I know they put a lot of their storytelling into the online or the MMO,
Mhm.
and I think Fallout 76 has kind of had like a decent enough run that I'm wondering if they're winding that one down as well because I don't get a feel that that's got the kind of excitement it did at some point with a negative launch, then kind of fixed itself, ended up in an okay place, but it's hard to keep those games fresh and unique and stuff like that. So
Yeah. That's like selling for like 10 euros over here now for the PS4. So yeah, it's kind of run a course already.
mhm.
It's a shame really because I played it like a while back and it turned out to be pretty good and just
Yeah,
hated it now.
same thing. I mean, I skipped it at launch. I heard all the bad stuff, and then I jumped into it. I would probably say about 2 years ago, right about now,
Yeah.
and I actually kind of enjoyed it. I mean, there was a lot of cool little things. I mean, they really went wild with the building your camp and building your
Hmm.
crafting things and stuff like that, and it felt kind of cool and fresh. I didn't really see any other players, which was a weird thing in an MMO, obviously, but
Yeah.
you
And
know,
it just felt like like a Fallout game. It kind
mhm,
of felt like, yeah, Fallout 4 minus like the solo story mission. But that
yeah.
sucked in Fallout 4, so I didn't miss it at all.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to the meat of today's discussion. So today I want to talk about games that won you over, right? And of course, I've been thinking about there's a lot of reasons why a game doesn't click with you or a person or anyone right off the bat, right? And sometimes even before the game comes out, you just get a feeling like, this isn't going to be for me. I'm not really going to enjoy this. And then eventually that game just kind of pulls you in, and it's not always the easiest process, and sometimes you get a couple false starts, where you just try the game out, nothing clicks, try the game out, nothing clicks, try the game out, nothing clicks. And the game that kind of brought this to my mind on my end was I got back into Elite Dangerous yet again for the 5 millionth time. But I was thinking about when I first started that game, what was hard for me, and everybody's kind of got that feeling when you start an open world game, right? Like it's like, oh wow, this is gonna be fun. I'm really gonna lose myself in the world. And then there's that kind of, after that 2-3 hour first part of the game, the introduction, you're like, okay, now what do I do, right? Um, so the one I wanted to bring that up because I find myself in a lot of open world games not having that direction right up front. It's either thrilling and exciting or it's like, okay, I don't really know what to go do. But having stuck with Elite Dangerous for as long as I had, to the point where I think I own damn near every ship and have billions of dollars of galactic credits, I just thought about, what is it about certain games where you want to give it a second chance, or you break through that initial annoying or confusing or directionless part, and brings you back into the game. So let's start out with just kind of broadly, what games do you guys find that, initially maybe pushed you away, but then it ended up pulling you in the more time you spent with it?
All right, nobody wants to jump. I'll jump. It's every Saga game that I've ever played.
That's a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is what immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
I can concur on that.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. And it's been hard for me to even sometimes pick those back up, even though I hear, great things about the series. I want to say I tried Frontier. Was that one of them?
That's the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, that was the very first one I played, and I could not figure that game out for the life of me. And I don't know when. I mean, obviously, it's gotten a lot better since, but that was my introduction to the Saga series and kind of my exit of the Saga series. So,
Yeah, I can distinctly remember renting Saga Frontier during the PlayStation 1 era as a young man. I had a bad habit. I would rent a JRPG on Friday. I'm taking a whole lot of notes, right? But I remember renting it and firing it in there, and it's a long enough ago memory that I couldn't be 100% sure, but I believe that I picked Emilia's story, which is the one that I actually just finished on Saga Frontier Remastered 20-some years later. And not quite 20. I'm actually younger than that. But I think I took Amelia, and I must have gone down into the sewers, because she starts in a city that has an extensive sewer. Got lost in the sewers, didn't know how to progress the game at all, and just decided, non-linear, games with stories where it tells you what to do. That's where it's at. And then I never went back to it for a very long time. And then I had a phase where I really wanted to go back and through emulation play all the Squaresoft Super NES games that never came to the West. And I bounced off one of the Romancing Saga games there. And then many years later, they start releasing these remasters on the Switch. And so there's 3 of them now that you can get on Switch. Romancing Saga 2, Romancing Saga 3, and Saga Frontier now. And I've gone through the same experience with all 3 of them, where I buy it, I start playing it, and I'm like, I don't get this. I can't seem to make anything happen in the game. I don't understand the combat. None of this makes any sense to me. But because they're so expensive, I push forward a little, and just the further and further I go, and you start to, okay, because the systems are opaque.
Yes.
Very strange.
Yep.
And not a single one of these games makes any effort to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, even though you could look at it and be like, I recognize this as a cousin of the Final Fantasy series, it's nothing like that.
Yeah.
And then eventually Romancing Saga 2 got its hooks in me, and I started understanding. I dumped a lot of hours into that. And then I went through the same thing with Romancing Saga 3, where I got it and I started playing it, and I was like, why did I like Romancing Saga 2? What's going on with this? I just paid $40 for this. I guess I'll plug. And then eventually I was just like, all right, I've started 3 new games at this point, but now I'm attached to this character, and I've found a way to cause a thing to happen, like a combination of people I can talk to where something occurs, and I feel like I'm progressing. And then it got its hooks in me, and I played a ton of that. Then I got Saga Frontier remastered recently, and once again, I fired it up, and I was like, what's the pitch here? And the battle system was slightly different from the Romancing Saga one. So by now, I'm a Romancing Saga fan. So I was like, what? There's no formations.
Like,
the game too simple.
You want the weird rules now?
Yeah. Well, it's still very weird, but it didn't. You don't get to choose these special formations to give different stats to people depending on where they are in the formation. And so I was like, this is disappointing, but I did spend all this freaking money on it again. So and then eventually, finally, it clicked, and maybe by the time that they've remastered Saga Frontier 2, I will be at the point where I just remember everything that I just said, and I'll just get it, and maybe I won't bounce off it at first, and I'll just get into it, and I'll know going in that it's just they like to go back to the drawing board on a lot of the underlying gameplay systems every time. So maybe I'll have imbibed that.
You know, because I had a similar experience to you with it where I rented it, right, way back on PS1. And I wonder if my experience would have been better had we had something like the internet where it was like, hey, you can play any of these characters and you're going to get to the same location. Because I thought I was playing the game totally wrong. I started with the robot.
Oh, I do.
Okay. There we go. That makes me feel better then. But yeah, and I was like, okay, none of this makes sense at all. What is this? Who is this guy? What are we talking about? What's the story? And I just thought like, oh, I should go back and pick somebody else. And I can't remember who I picked after that. But then I was like, no, actually, I want to play as the robot. And then I ended up just like, you know, getting nowhere in the game, just bringing it back to Blockbuster. So I wish now though that I would have maybe like part of it is I've gotten more like I understand like how plots and stories don't have to be necessarily all linked and connected and stuff like that. But I totally agree with you because I had the exact same experience down to renting it and being like, what the hell is this? That maybe I should try it again and see if it connects with me.
Yeah, oh, you go first.
sorry, I was just quickly mention my experience with the one experience that like really sticks in my mind is with Romance in Saga 3, where I never beat 2, but like I got a feel for how I progressed the story, and then I just got stuck on like a boss fight.
Hmm.
But with 3, I remember because lately when I've been starting new games, I try to not spoil myself. I try to not rely on guides and such. And so when I started playing the remaster of 3, I can't remember who I picked as the main character, but when you got out of the intro and the world opened up a bit, I had no idea where to go or how to trigger any quests and such.
Hmm.
And then I think around the same time, like a week after that remaster came out, I got distracted by Pokemon, and that was the end of that. But then it was just a conscious decision I made in earlier this year that I was I was gonna go back to 3 Romance in Saga 3 and beat it, and I would follow a strict guide on the internet on like how to trigger things, when and where and such, and that seemed to be the thing that like once I knew how to actively trigger plot events and keep moving forward in the game and have an idea of like what order I should do things in, so I don't accidentally like walk in to try and fight one of the major bosses who could wipe the floor if you're not high enough level. The game doesn't have levels, but your stats aren't high enough.
Yeah.
And that got it to click with me, and I got to the final boss, and then I couldn't beat the final boss, so that caused things to click out.
Yeah, do you know where I got stuck in Romancing Saga 3? Because I did not beat the game either. But it was when you go into the end game, and the very first thing that happens is you get attacked by just like a random generic dragon.
Oh, that drag! I know what dragon you're talking about. I think at one point I kept trying, and I just got lucky.
Yeah, and with these games, with the Saga games, you can get so lucky because of the spark system for abilities, where your characters learn new abilities basically at random. I beat one of the toughest side bosses in Saga Frontier in a fight where, just fortunately by coincidence, one of my swordsmen just learned an incredibly powerful technique in the middle of the fight, and he had just enough WP. I don't even know what the W stands for, but basically ability points. He had just enough of them left to do it exactly the number of times I needed to do to then kill the boss with one normal attack when all of my characters were out of abilities.
You know, you mentioned one thing that is almost impossible for me. I want to see how it works for you all, but it is so hard for me to drop an RPG and then come back to it. Like almost impossible. Like if I drop an RPG for like 6 months, I can't just go back to where I was with it. I almost got to restart. And then I kind of get that feeling like, oh man, here we go again. I've probably played the intro to certain RPGs 50 times, trying to kind of like get back into it or figure it out or get into it. And I can't, it's hard for me to leave off at like, 10 hours into an RPG, take a break for 6 months, and then get back into it. 'Cause there's so much of, wait, what the hell was I doing? Why was my character? Who is this? There's so much of that in my mind that, I don't know, maybe when you get older, it kind of just all blurs. But like, it's very hard for me to just jump back into an RPG. Is that something that you guys experience too, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure, it's the main reason why I don't play like a lot of RPGs, because I'm like very pick up and play, because sometimes I will like finish 4 games in like 2 weeks, and then I will not play like anything besides Animal Crossing, maybe some small game on the Switch for like the next 2 months. Yeah, I had a problem with the most recent Fire Emblem game, which I started and then laid away and then started again for like at least 5 times.
Okay, that
And
sounds
that
like me
game's
then.
pretty not too long, but still it's like 30 hours. It's kind of wrecked me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 90% of RPGs, if I leave off for a couple months, I really can't get back into it.
Mhm.
I think sometimes I can force myself back into it if I just remind myself that I want to beat the game, and I also never want to play through like the intro part again.
Yeah.
So like one of the other games I'm currently playing, not as much as Nier Automata, but is the Final Fantasy VII port on the Switch. And there was a couple months ago, I got a few hours in, right up until like you leave Midgard and you finally get to the world map, and then I put it down, and I had to look up exactly, okay, where on the world map do I go next?
hmm
But I just had to tell myself, I really do not feel like going through the opening bombing mission and all that stuff again.
You know what game is the number one example for me in my mind with that is Red Dead Redemption 2. I
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, that beginning is just excruciating when you have to like walk through the snow and get there and go hunting. I mean, the tutorials just never seem to end for that whole first act. And that's a game that I've bounced off of, fell in love with, bounced off of, felt like so many times. And I go to pick it up. I'm like, wait, what the hell am I doing here? And then I get that feeling, okay, well, I should start over because I'm always around that Act 3 area, because
Yeah.
that's what I hate the game again. So to me, that might be an example of a game where like it won me over and then lost me all over again, right? Like worst opening, great, great, great. I don't know, first act. Right when you're kind of getting to the town and developing your stuff and driving around it, oh man, the world feels so open and alive, and then that game pull the rug out from you, and it loses me all over again, right? So if we ever talk about games that won you over, then lost you, then won you over, then lost you, um, it might be Red Dead Redemption, but just an awful first, maybe 4 hours to that game.
No, it's more like 6. Because like the tutorials in the
Yeah.
snow, then you go to the farm.
Yeah.
And I think the worst part about Red Dead Redemption was because I had the same problem as Kappa. I had just like a feeling I should be like soldiering on and just finish it, because otherwise I will never. And then you finish it, like the main story, and you get like the epilogue, which is like another 6-7 hours. And that epilogue is really good. It's like really good if it was like a separate loose mission, but it's like you forced to play it afterwards, and
Mhm.
kind of destroyed my opinion of the game, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just such a good, strong second act where like you feel like, wow, this might be my favorite game ever. I can roam around, I can do whatever I want. But basically, if you push the game forward to a certain point, the game gets worse. That's wild to me, right? Like, I mean,
That's very repetitive.
mhm,
I think the worst part is like the part you're fighting all the gangs, and it's like 5 times the missions in a row. Go to a villa or a southern
mhm.
house, shoot everybody dead,
And every gang
And
has
there's like
5,000 people
always
in it.
one guy, the computer guy, the NPC is like escaping or trying or get locked in like one of the barns, so
Mhm.
you can't clear it, but you don't know why. You keep
It's
like searching around and looking for the guy, and you're lost like another 30 minutes again. I had that like happen to me like 3 times in a row. It
Yeah.
sucks.
And not to just keep beating up the game, but they put so much emphasis on combat in the game. And the combat's
Mm.
maybe the worst part of the whole game, right? The
Oh yeah,
shooting
it
is
fucking sucks.
awful. I
It,
mean,
I played it. I played it back to back with GTA, the latest GTA.
mhm,
I was like, yeah, I should replay that, and that story is surprisingly good.
sure.
I really like that story.
Yeah.
But it's like the combat in that is great. I know they need to adapt it to like more Western times with Red Dead, but like the first Red Dead plays way better also with controls and shooting.
Mhm.
Two's just like kind of like yeah, it sucks. Like it doesn't really focus on enemies a lot. It has a hard time picking the target and stuff.
Oh, and then
It's bad.
every mission is for some reason it's not like you fight a gang of 10 or 15 guys, which would be at least feeling somewhat realistic. It's just they keep coming. You're fighting
Yeah.
armies, not gangs. Like if there was that many outlaws, you'd have to send in the Marines at this point. I mean, it's not like you know it was overbearing. And
Yeah.
I
Like you said, like in the second half, it's like you go attack a farm. Farm is like 15 people, but like in the third and fourth act, you got like those southern houses, and there are like 60 guys in there. There's like a bunch of your NPC gang are like shooting at nothing, so you need to clear them all.
and the mechanic is just the shooting is just so bad. You're always waiting for your dead eye, right? Or you're always
Yeah.
sitting there mid fight, just chugging little little bottles of shit so you can shoot straight. It's I don't know, but um, game I wanted to bring up. I'm not sure how much other people remember this, but as far as a game that looked crappy in like preview footage, trailers, stuff like that, Diablo 3 when that was kind of first announced, and I'm not talking the color controversy. I don't know if you remember that, um, but a lot of the early Diablo 3 trailers look like they really missed the mark on what made Diablo 2 fun. And the Diablo 3 launch was awful in a lot of ways. I don't know if you remember the Real Money auction house that
Oh,
they.
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember
I didn't,
that.
I didn't even play the game at that time, and I played the game after it was patched out. But
Mhm.
it impressed itself on my mind when I heard about it.
So there was the cinematic trailer, which it's Blizzard. They knocked that out of the park. And then I think the first gameplay trailer they released looked like they had made some very big mistakes. It used a lot of sounds from Warcraft, and a lot of even like down to like the ability icons and stuff. And they kind of showed off the barbarian first, who has a lot of boring abilities, right? Like he jumps, and things like that. And they kept the enemy density kind of low, and they also didn't really like juice up the drop rate. So you were watching this guy kind of fight packs of monsters and get like a white drop. And he was just kind of jumping spot to spot to spot, fighting little. And that's not what Diablo was about at all, right? Like if you played a lot of Diablo 2, it was I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna fight a horde of monsters, shit's gonna be flying everywhere, loot's gonna be raining from the sky, right? It's a very like I don't know, I want to say like Pavlovian experience, right? Where you just walk through air, you hear these ching 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 chings, and you're just looking on the ground, and there's loot everywhere, and everything's dead, and there's all these cool abilities you're using, and I felt like they were trying to make it like a slower, different game almost. And at launch, it had a lot of mistakes, but slowly you started to get back into. You're like, okay, yeah, they got this for the most part right. It won me over by the end of my end of the Diablo 3 experience I had. I loved the game, not as much maybe as 2, but that was something that those kind of first initial launch missteps for me. One, the trailer, and then two, that Real Money auction house was a fucking awful idea. I still have like 14 cents on my Blizzard account because I think I sold like like a gem in Diablo for like 11 cents or something. Or I don't know what it is, but like I can't get rid of it. It's still sitting there in my Battle.net. Every time I log into my Battle.net, it's just on the top right. My account balance is something from something I sold on that stupid fucking Real Money auction house. But that was a game that just for launch reasons and for trailer reasons, I thought, whoa, we've got our first fucking Blizzard flop, and that would definitely come later with a little thing called Warcraft Reforged. But
Ooh.
I ended up liking Diablo 3 fine. And there was the other part of the internet with Diablo 3 that was angry about the color controversy. They'd made it too bright, too cheery. Diablo is supposed to be dark and gloomy and edgy, and I didn't really go too much with that line of thinking. Art style is an art style, right? But man, the between those other things, that boring trailer and the just the bad taste in my mouth from, hey, you want to make a cool set in Diablo? Well, fork out $14 to some guy, some gold farmer in China, or I think that's where most of the gold farms are, and then you end up getting all that cool stuff, right? That was not how I wanted to play Diablo at all. So that one, I think, even pre-playing the game, kind of put me in that mood. But then the game itself eventually patched to damn near, Diablo 2 levels won me over.
Yeah, I got like something completely else for like games that look crappy in preview.
Yeah.
I was like thinking about it, and the first thing that came to mind was the original trailer for No More Heroes.
Oh yeah.
The Switch. They're like these really weird, stylish things that make like Travis look like a really cool guy. And the fun part about the game, and it's very Suda, is that he's like an unbelievable sad sack. He lives
Mhm.
like in a motel. He has like no money, and he buys like laser saber online, and that gets him like into the situations, but he still remains like a giant creep. And the trailer is like very stylish and makes it look like it's like a cool ninja game,
Yeah.
which it really isn't. It's like
Yeah.
the most weirdest like sad sack action game ever. It's a game I
It's
really like still, but like I rewatched the trailer and I was like, well, they really fucked this up.
Yeah, I got the feeling that Travis Touchdown was going to be like a super badass. I don't even know. Like, I thought he was going to be like most anime. I don't watch a lot of anime, but you guys get what I mean, right? Like, kind of like, oh, look at me, I'm the chosen one, and I've
Yeah,
got all these
but it's
abilities,
like
and
it's like based on Johnny Knoxville. No
Mhm.
joke.
Yeah,
Like Shura was like a big Jackass fan, and he like my main inspiration for personality and for look was like Johnny Knoxville. And he didn't base it like at all at anime, and he also kind of based it on like some of the 1980s action movie anti-heroes,
hmm
but not like the big bulky ones, but like the movies where it's like James Caan fights a gang of cops and stuff like that. It's like such a weird character
yeah.
to exist.
I ended up loving No More Heroes. It's probably still to this day the only Suda game I really liked start to finish.
Oh,
And
it's such a great game.
But I think it might be one that I might have actually liked better if I'd have known nothing about it going into it, not even seen like the cover of
Yeah.
the game. Do you know what I mean? Like just looking at that cover, I was like, oh, here we go. But then, yeah, you're right. I think it's a good one to like win you over just looking at the game itself. Lollipop Chainsaw, I did like for the most part, and I
Oh, I
got what
really
it was.
liked that game.
Yeah,
Yeah, we talked about it before in the last podcast as I was on. Yeah, I think that game is like deeply underrated. It's not great,
hmm
but it's like a lot of fun. It's like trashy on design. It's clearly very rushed, and you can
yes,
clearly see
that's
their budget got like shortened pretty much because the second part of the game gets like really iffy with some sort of controls and environment. But the writing on it is like really funny still
yeah.
if you like that kind of trauma, James Gunn kind of humor.
hmm
But yeah, it's a game that holds up pretty damn well. The same goes for No More Heroes. I should really get like the Switch ports. I heard they're pretty good.
It's weird to me that Suda's games haven't been getting remasters and ports and stuff like that. I mean, you would think that there was enough of a fan base, especially at the time, but I haven't heard
Yeah,
much about his getting any of that stuff, at least that I've heard of. So,
yeah,
uh,
you got like the
I
No
think
More
the No
Heroes
More
remasters
Heroes.
for the Switch.
oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, the 1 and 2 and 3 also.
Okay.
They came out pretty recently, I think, or they're like still coming out.
Okay.
3 is not out yet, but there was like a spin-off that was made for the Switch.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a weird arcade game. I don't know precisely what it was.
They can
Yeah,
keep.
I remember reading that like the levels are all homages to different video game genres or something like that. I'm not sure how much the gameplay goes along with that. Probably to some degree.
Yeah, I had no idea that. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that when it comes to Suda games, yeah, it's kind of a don't judge the book by its cover, but he's doing it purposely in a way, right? Like,
Mhm.
especially I would say No More Heroes and Lollipop Chainsaw. He's really saying, look, you know what this is going to be about. Look at the cover. Look at the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then you play and you're like, oh, okay, got me. So,
Yeah, Killer is Dead is like its most straight game,
mhm.
and it's still like off the ball wonkers, but it's like in atmosphere. It's very much like a cool, stylish New Japan samurai movie.
Yeah.
It's a
Killer
really
7 was
fun game.
the hardest one
Yeah,
for
it's a
me to
good
get
game
into.
also.
That I couldn't get into that one, but the rest of them, I mean, yeah, he's got such a cool style, and I think that's what
Yeah.
everybody appreciates so much about him. Like it's one of those people like I might not like his games, but I'm glad he's out there making them. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
sure.
remember having any fun with Killer 7 when I played
Exactly.
it.
Killer
But
7 is pretty dreadful to replay, but it's mostly
it's
lies on
like,
the GameCube controls for it, which are really bad.
yeah, but it's just like implanted, like images from it I can just remember, and the basic, like, it's very impactful without
Mhm.
being particularly fun.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if you showed me a screenshot of Killer 7 right now, I go, oh yeah, it's Killer 7. Like it's got that kind of mental, space for me. So that's a good thing though, to be like, oh okay, yeah, I recognize that game. I played it. I think you want that a lot of times if you're making cool games, right? So Stoneheart, what you got? Any that you're thinking of?
For games that grew on me,
Hmm.
uh, so one I hope I'm not getting myself out. Sorry, hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here. But one game that like took multiple tries for me to get into, but then once I got into it, it like became one of my favorite game series is the Baldur's Gate series.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And I I, I think the main thing that made it difficult to get into was I started with Baldur's Gate 1, which the whole most of the gameplay and rule set is a sort of real time with pause take on second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
and you start
Hmm.
at level 1, and it level 1 Dungeons and Dragons is really tough to play in in an RPG rated like 98. It's not good to start with there, but I think the thing that the thing that finally made me realize I was sort of going about it wrong is I kept on trying to the first couple of times I played, I always played as a mage because
Oh
that's
yeah.
sort of the class I gravitate towards.
Good luck in
But a
Baldur's Gate.
mage at level 1 is very pathetic. You get two you get two spells you can cast before you have to rest for 8 hours.
Hmm.
You have like 4 HP when most things can do 8 HP of damage in one attack. So like everything kills you in one hit basically. And I realized eventually how to control my mage party members and such. But the thing that sort of made it click was I decided to play as the cleric instead,
Hmm.
and I figured out what kind of spells I should focus on, and I shouldn't ignore buff spells and just in general the specifics of it. And I kept at it until I leveled up enough that it was not everyone died in 2 hits, and not all. And the other problem is in the very beginning it's very tough.
Oh yeah.
It's very tough to hit things, so it kind of it kind of feels like at first watching like a couple of blindfolded people fight with knives. Both feet just swinging in the air, but if there's ever a hit, it's gonna end up bad.
Yeah.
Um,
Just real quick. This actually, I think my very first playthrough of Baldur's Gate, or maybe it was Icewind Dale, I died in the inn killing the rats.
yeah,
I
Oh
just
god,
sat there.
yeah.
I'm like,
they swing at the rats, and
hit the
eventually
fucking
they get
rat.
into fighting, and
Yeah, that reminds me of Fallout 1. I did the same thing with like the start where you need to clear out the tunnel for rats. And I died like 5 times because I was like, yeah, this should be easy. Yeah, no, I got like nod to that.
Yeah, and the thing that it brought to mind for me was actually Fallout 2,
Mhm.
where it opens with like you must do this, ancient test where the
Oh yeah,
temp
yeah.
trial, and then you're getting killed over and over again by these basic scorpion enemies because you can't reliably hit them unless you've juiced your melee weapon
Yeah.
character creation. So it's like I'm not convinced that I'm the chosen one. like
And
I know I made it through the trial, but there was a lot of save scumming involved there.
one thing about Baldur's Gate too, I think Stoneheart, you probably recognize this too, especially at the beginning too, is you don't really understand the itemization either. Like the game doesn't really tell you like what weapons do this, what weapons do that. It's got that old style. I'm not super into D&D. You guys might know this better, but that THAC zero system.
Oh, that whole thing. I I I realized eventually, like, okay, you want like with armor class, you want lower numbers because that I it's like negative number. If you can get your armor class negative, that's good, and it's still like I'm glad they ditched that in eventually, but
Yeah, it was always so confusing.
it's unintuitive.
Because I would always give like my starting like tank, I would give him like a sword and shield. I'm like, this guy can't hit shit and he's still getting destroyed. Like, what is going on here? And you're right, Baldur's Gate wasn't intuitive at all. It was almost a game you had to learn by just, I mean, literally sometimes not even making out of some of the intro areas, right? The game just beat the crap out of you, and you either stuck with it or didn't. And then when you did, it was probably the best narrative of an early RPG I ever played. I mean, that story felt amazing, but I had to really just, I mean, I think at the first time I beat it, I honestly had a party that was just basically like 3 warriors and 3 clerics, and I was just like, whatever, we're getting through this. Everybody put on a shield, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think I had a mage who I remember like near the end game I had a mage who like all her level 3 spells were fireball, and I just kept her very far away from things.
Hmm.
But I remember when I finally like beat the final boss, my strategy was like if if my cleric had as many animate dead spells that he could memorize. And so instead of having anyone get near the final boss, I would just swarm him with skeletons.
Hmm. And I think even we mentioned Fallout, we mentioned this game too. Um, the game suggested parties or characters to you, right? And I was always one, fuck that, I'm making my own, right? And you could very easily just have a total shit character in Fallout 1 or a total shit party in Baldur's Gate and not even know it, right? And you get to the end of the game, you're like, wait a minute, I can't
Oh
even,
yeah.
I can't even beat these, things I'm supposed to be able to beat. I can't go back, I can't do anything, I'm stuck here. And you'd have to restart the game. That was wild, right? You don't see that too much anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah. The last thing I saw it on was like, of course, Wastelands, which is even worse on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wastelands like has like a pretty the first one, yeah, you played it also. The first one has like a pretty long introduction, right, Kappa?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I made like a really shit character, and I got like stuck after like the nearly 1.5 hour of exposition, so I needed to start again with another character, which also sucked. So I needed to start again, and then it was okay, but I was still like 3 hours in.
At least in Wasteland, though, you can see like different enemy archetypes. And you're like, oh, wow, that's really effective. It makes sense to
Yeah,
have a shotgun rusher. But when you're playing Baldur's Gate, it's a little bit different because it's like, why the hell did this wolf kill me? I ran into a bear and it was a total party wipe. Like, holy shit, where do I even start with it?
Yeah,
Um, but I think a lot of the latest CRPG re-releases, like your Pillars and stuff like that, they've kind of fixed that problem a little bit, right? They've made everybody kind of, I would say, start at probably the equivalent of like level 4 or level 5. I feel like the Baldur's Gate equivalent. Like you've got some spells, you got some abilities, and if you pick the right weapon, you can actually hit shit with it. That those
yeah, you
combat.
don't
Mhm.
die in 2 hits.
Yeah, yeah. You don't start out
That's
with 4 hit points.
the most important part to me.
Yeah, that is true. I'm thinking about my Icewind Dale party. I bet you start out with like a 4 hit point wizard for sure, or like what is it, sorcerer? I think in that one. But yeah, that's a good example though of a game that everybody's probably told you a million times, hey, this is an all-time great, and then you fire that up and you're like, nope, not for me. And if you stick with it though, and if it wins you over, shit, it is an all-time great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real tradition of those classic computer RPGs
Mm-hmm.
to just punish you again and again and again at the very start. Like it's not a game that like teaches you as you go through.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
game. A lot of the teaching happens in the like 70 times that you play through the first couple hours, try and finally get that balance.
Yeah, yeah, and like it teaches you in a way, in a language of failure, right? It's like, nope, this ain't
Yeah.
gonna work. See you later. It's not like, oh well, hey, adjust this, try this. No, no, it's just back to the start, figure it out again, buddy. And again, a lot of Baldur's Gate stuff was in those early internet days, so you really had to kind of figure out, hey, what is a party that works, or things like that. And I remember one of my first internet things with might have been Baldur's Gate 2 was trying to figure out the AI, how to program the AI in that game to not be just so fucking brain dead. Like I remember I just like, hey, my warrior's dying here, clerics. You want to do anything? And they're just sitting over there, swinging staffs at a tree or something. And it's just, yeah. I mean, very early on, I had to really mess with that AI stuff to make the party even kind of useful, right? But yeah, I think if you stuck with Baldur's Gate or Fallout definitely, or any of those early games, if you got past that punishment time, I mean, that's kind of an old game development idea though, right? You gotta beat the shit out of the player into submission until they play the game the way you want to. You don't see that much anymore in good games, right?
Mm. Yeah, with Fallout, I remember. Well, Fallout 2 is the one that I've played the most, and yeah, early on, you got to save before every fight. And you're gonna have to try it like 20 times to
Hmm.
beat these rats or these rad scorpions or whatever they are, and then eventually, you're walking along, and like a gang accosts you. And you just pop open your like targeted aiming, and you're just shooting them all in the eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Heads
the
exploding
perfect
left and
game.
right. Yeah.
It 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 takes a while to get there, and then when you get there, you do feel very powerful.
Yeah, but it's like a dying thing because like those games were released in a time where like a lot less stuff was coming out, and it just felt like people could sink like a lot more time into games
Mhm.
without getting distracted. Because if a lot of those games would be released like now, like Fallout, like a lot of people would go, yeah, I don't have like the time or even the motivation to sit through the same thing like 15 times.
Yeah.
And that's like stuff like Wastelands still gets released, but it's all like crowdfunded for like
Mhm.
this really niche group.
Yeah, and I think there's a point to like an RPG where if you persist and you enjoy the game, you do appreciate what it did at that beginning. I think a lot about even like a more modern one like Dragon Age.
Yeah,
Depending on your origin, right? That game felt really disconnected and weird and had huge difficulty leaps depending on what you played and how you played it. And I remember that game. I bet you I quit Dragon Age 5 times before I made it to Lothering, and finally realized like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, yeah, I'm the chosen one, but I got a lot of shit to do to get there. And you had really basic attacks, really boring abilities, and I think my first character was a dwarf noble, right? And I was like, what the hell does any of this have to do with anything? Because the story didn't really connect a lot of it at the beginning. So like that one kind of narratively pushed me away. The mechanics were still pretty solid, and I don't think I built like a awful character. But I remember thinking like, maybe I'm not supposed to be a dwarf noble. Maybe I'm supposed to play as a human because it makes more sense that I'm going here and helping all these humans and stuff, and all these people are assholes to me because I'm a dwarf and all this other stuff, right? But then that game definitely comes back around and is like, no, play as what you want, and that this is your character. And I kind of had to almost trust. I had to trust the game to get there, right? Like to connect those dots and make it feel okay that I picked something that really, at least at the beginning of the story, narratively didn't seem to fit at all. Why I'm there fighting, for these humans that seem to kind of hate me. And I bet you would have been even worse if I picked the Dalish Elf, right? So I always think about that, like those first couple of hours where, like, maybe not the gameplay or the technical stuff, but the story kind of pushes you out of a game, right? I think there's a couple examples of that, but like Dragon Age to me is one that that really kind of did that to me. And then by the end, I ended up loving it. But it took me a lot of false starts to really get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
This is actually stepping backwards a game, but with the early RPG difficulty in the Divinity Original Sin games,
Yeah.
you get a very similar getting your ass kicked constantly at the start of the game setup, but it's different because it has nothing to do with your character creation and everything to do with the fact that the game has really complex overlapping uh, elemental interactions.
Right. Yeah, I
And
remember that.
so all of the early fights that are available to you once you get out of the tutorial area they're all so tough that they'll just kill you. It doesn't matter where you go. And for a while, I remember playing the first one with my ex, and we were bouncing off it because we looked everywhere, and it's like we can't win a single one of these fights because everything is higher level than us.
Yeah, you're talking about the divine divinity, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But what the game wants you to eventually realize in Original Sin is that it's all about exploiting those interactions and figuring out how many different things could I stack together such that I'm going to have, like, how can I stop them from getting attacks on me while also doing tons of extra damage? And yeah.
And
So
it
That's
happens.
also that's also like an interesting game. It kind of ties in back with my argument also, like, because that's also like a game that got most of its funds from a Kickstarter. Because it's also like yeah, pretty niche game because it like endlessly punishes you to like try to see the way the game wants you to see and just want to discover how you need to figure things out.
And Larian has kind of developed into like one of the best RPG studios, period, right now. And
Yeah.
you know that Divine Divinity, if I remember right, it basically doesn't even tell you how to make a class. It just gives you like a giant skill tree, right? It just says, good luck, kind of pick along the way, right? I remember you could pretty much learn every skill in that game right off the bat, right?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the thing I know mostly about Larian, they're like I think the only like really big Belgium studio, and they like got most of their funding because they did like the web design for the Flemish national TV channel, their children's site. They did like the web design for it. That's like where they got like a lot of their funding from first.
And now they're making Baldur's Gate to bring it all the way back around, like
yeah, Baldur's Gate 3.
Good for them, man. Yeah, I like when and they've always been at PAX since the early days, and they were always the nicest like team at PAX. They're always very kind of like welcoming. They let you sit there. I remember one of the things that they had was they didn't have time demos. They kind of let you sit there and play. For a good amount of time. They weren't kicking you out unless, there was a big line, but they were always so cool there. And I always appreciated that about them. So one last one I wanted to mention was sometimes, at least for me, there's games like, especially multiplayer games, where you just figure I'm never going to be any good at this. I'm never going to figure out how this game works, and I'm tired of getting killed by a million different people, from a million different ways. And that game for me is a game maybe you've heard of. It's a little game called Fortnite. When I started Fortnite, I was honest to God, I've played a lot of shooters for a lot of years, and I was just overwhelmed. It was too much for me, right? The building, the shooting, the looting, the gathering, the shields, it was just like I felt like I was always juggling something. Even when I would be in my inventory, like, cleaning it up or getting weapons moved or finding out how much ammo I had, it was always felt like I was like doing something wrong. I was always vulnerable. If I build, I would give my position away. If I didn't build, I got shot from, somebody who did. So I always felt like I was making the wrong decisions, right? And I think what changed, well, one, I started playing it more with my kid, and I was like, okay, well, if he's having fun, I'm having fun. But the other thing about Fortnite I kind of learned is like, it's a game where it's okay if you die 53rd or 16th or 19th, but the game's teaching you a lot in little different ways, and how you approach a fight there's not really a wrong or right answer. It's very much like a game of paper, rock, scissors sometimes. I mean, yeah, there's going to be people who are crazy good and people who aren't, but whether you build or didn't, maybe it didn't even matter. You just ended up losing because that's how that fight went, and somebody had a different gun that you didn't have, or they saw you first, or one of a million different variables. And once I kind of started to learn to just a little bit stop caring, that really increased my joy of Fortnite. I can't imagine playing it like competitively or streaming it or playing it for money because it's probably so different, right? But just playing it as like if I die, okay, on to the next one type game, I really started to enjoy it. So I think that was more on me than the game. But lately, I've actually been kind of enjoying Fortnite weirdly. So I pop it in every now and then, and I do like it. So
Yeah, speaking about building stuff, I also had like one. I was like watching this YouTube channel, Stop Skeletons for Fighting, which I really like. They did like coverage about the Engage.
Mhm.
Remember the Engage?
Oh yeah, I do. The phone,
Knockout.
yeah.
Yeah, and they brought like up, yeah, John Romero did like Monkey Stone did like the Engage adaptation for Red Faction. And I was like, fuck yeah, Red Faction is a game I hated when I started it. And then turned out we had like a lot of fun. But Red Faction starts in like a horrible level where you're like in the mines and trying to find a way out. You get shouted at from every direction and there's not really a clear path to go.
Hmm.
You keep getting shot at. But like if you clear that and then there's a lot of levels where you're still trying to learn like its mechanics, which are like really jerky because it's a 2002 nearly launch game, I think, which was originally, I think, even designed for the PS1. But when you clear that, it's so much fun because you can like blow out doors and blow up like tanks and bridges if they cross it. It's such a weird game still to play. It has
Mm.
like it's part of the PS2 classics for the PS4 store still. And it's such a weird selection for that because it's like a game that's horribly dated. Even in the start, it's god awful, but if you go through it, it's just so much fun to just destroy shit and let like tanks sink and stuff.
Yeah, it's weird how that sometimes it's just up to you to like change your mindset, right? To accept or bring in a game and just okay, well I'm gonna play this game how I want to play it on my own terms, and sometimes that's all you need, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I was originally. It's not a game that won me over because it pretty much when I played it finally, it won me over almost instantly. But Dark Souls was something it took me a long time to get into because I was so put off by the way people were talking about what it was like and sort of the
Yeah,
culture that surrounded it did not make it sound appealing to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm
a
like
lot of the, you gotta,
yeah, I'm
just
like
a
not
lot
at
of
all
snobbery.
into. Well, yeah, I'm not like not at all into dark games. Dark Souls. Like I played like the first one and Bloodborne, and both I like suck at, and I just don't have the patience to like replay stuff like 20 times in a row. To be honest.
Oh, if you don't have the appetite for that, yeah, you're never gonna get into the games, and that is
Yeah.
totally fair. For me, it was that I would read people talking about it, and some of it is that the whole get good thing, and then some of it is people being like, well, you have to put this much into this stat and this into this, and this stat's a
Hmm.
junk stat, and you should never. And it all sounded very, very intimidating and like and constrained. Like people talked about it like there was a right way to play it. And then when I finally got into it and started to get the first, I fell in love just with the gameplay and the setting, and I didn't even gather that there was a story to go back to what the Kappa was saying. uh, then later when I found out that there was a story, I was like, oh, this is really cool too. But when I finally understood the stats, when I went back and to play it a second time, I started to realize that it's not just that there's no right way to play it, or you don't have to play it the one way that some nerd on Reddit or whatever told you have to, but it's that the stats align so well with the actual mechanical experience of playing the game that you can really pick a fantasy archetype that you like and build a character to be like that. And it might not be an optimized character, but you can do it and you can play the game. You can be, I'm a samurai. I don't wear armor and I just have a
Hmm.
sword. I'm a wandering samurai, or I'm one of my favorite characters to make in this game is I call it spell fencer. So like I have a spell casting implement in one hand and a rapier in the other hand, which I don't think you'd ever find a guide to Dark Souls that would say you should use a rapier. I don't gather that they're very well regarded weapons, but if you want to play with one, it's gonna feel like you're fencing, and it all it comes together very well. But you kind of have to tune out a lot of the voices telling you what the game is supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point with Dark Souls. One, I mean, I don't want to get too controversial, but I do think the difficulty is a little overstated when it comes to that game, right? Like,
Oh, great.
I mean, like, I've definitely heard like, oh, I mean, like, I would probably get through, I think I got through two and like, a couple, like maybe like what, I don't know how long, but I didn't feel like I never got to that point where like, oh my God, it's just so hard. I'm never going to beat this. Like there was definitely some bosses where I'm like, this is bullshit. This is cheap. And then you're right. I had to adjust certain things and I was back at it. But, one of the things that really killed me off on the series was like you're saying, was you go online and be like, this is really the only build that's gonna beat this game. It's a max soul, no corpse, what you know what I mean? Like just real
Yeah.
weird things. You got to get this specific sword, pledged to this specific company, and it felt less like I was playing an RPG, and it was almost like forcing me into like a linear game in a way, right? And I'm glad that I got away from that because the sooner I did, the more I was like, okay, yeah, I can just play this game. It's not that hard. I can hit things with a sword and dodge when I need to. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the series goes from there because I do think a lot of the ideas behind it and a lot of stuff that it does as a game is based on we want it to be hard. We want it to seem impossible. We want people to develop specific builds that make it easy to get through. And I don't think that's necessarily what everybody wants from that series, though.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Elden Ring
Mhm.
allows in terms of who you're going to be and what it's going to play like, and how much of the DNA of Dark Souls.
Yeah, because I don't think you get George R. R. Martin to write a story for a game that you know is going to sell like hotcakes because it's an RPG, and I don't think you make that game and don't want people to beat it, if that makes sense, right? Like you want it to be at least somewhat more approachable than I guess your average Souls game because you know, and then that's going to lead to your core fans saying, "Oh, they dumbed it down. I don't like it. They dumbed it down," right? And you always get that weird little "Who's it for?" right? Too hard for the casuals, too easy for the hardcore, kind of.
Yeah, I I don't know. I'll be interested to see where the difficulty comes in
Hmm.
back in, because I like the difficulty of Dark Souls, but I'm also I'm a childless adult who's been playing video games constantly. So I have the time to put in to get good at something. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to find out whatever the hell this game is going to be. And I assume you got to assume it's going to share a lot of DNA just because all their games do.
Yeah.
Miyazaki. Like Sekiro is very much its own thing, but it's its own thing that shares a whole lot of DNA at the core of the gameplay with Dark Souls.
Yeah, you've got to hit those certain. You got to make the game feel right for sure if that's what you're selling their game on. But I I wonder sometimes with Dark Souls how much story you can put into the game in a weird way because like so much of the game feels like going from area to area to area and letting the environment tell the story. I don't know how much fun it would be as if you're getting pulled out every 20 minutes for some exposition dump about why this swamp is poisoned and what skeletons are in it, and you know what I mean, that kind of thing, right? It's interesting to find out kind of almost after the fact, like lore wise, but I don't know. I think that people are going to expect more from a George R. R. Martin RPG, right?
Yeah, I think I would predict that anybody who is coming to Elden Ring specifically because like they love Song of Ice and Fire, or I guess there must be people who love wild cards because I hear about this wild cards thing all the time.
Yeah.
But
I've read some of it.
yeah, but I think anybody coming to it for the George R. R. Martin will be disappointed almost immediately because I think the sense that I get is that he sort of wrote the backstory for them.
Hmm.
But while we were speaking about it earlier when we were talking about E3, I went to Wikipedia to look, and it did say, unlike traditional RPGs, there won't be towns full of NPCs. Instead, there will just be ruins of those towns.
Mm.
I thought, yeah, that actually by this point that is traditional. That's exactly what we would expect from a From Software game. So I think a lot of the story is going to be submerged in a lot of the same ways that Dark Souls stories are, but who knows?
Yeah.
It is an interesting combination of super minimalist storytelling.
And plus, it's pretty high on the hype cycle just because it's been kind of dry period right now for games, right? I mean, like, you got a lot of the same sequels and this and that, but there's not a lot of big IPs, new IPs being announced left and right like it felt like there was 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm sure that's pandemic, maybe we get a little mini, burst this E3, but it will be interesting to see kind of where that one goes, because you can't convince me that From Software at some point doesn't want to be, hey, we kind of want to step out of the shadow of our games are really hard for really hard people and super hardcore gamers to, yeah, we make RPGs that the average person can enjoy, but it's got a hardcore element or something to it. But yeah, anybody else got any that, games that won them over? All right. Well, let's wrap this one up. So I will say you can check out our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com, where you can find each episode's link dump that Merv will hopefully be doing, because I'm not very good at them. On iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, search for the Avocado Gamescast, and check out the Avocado at the-avocado.org. Merv always likes to bring up that he doesn't like the hyphen, so I'll give you guys a little bit of avocado lore. You ready? So when we bought the domain, I had no idea what we were doing, and I didn't know how long the site would even last, or even if it was going to be something that we moved off of Discuss channels. And so somehow adding that hyphen was like half the cost. I think it's so bad, like search optimization wise, to have a hyphen in your URL, right? Like it's just unheard of, But at the time, I didn't even know if we were going to actually migrate the site or do anything with it. So yeah, that's why we did it, because I was being cheap and I didn't know how much. I didn't know we'd be 5 years down the line and be like, why the hell did I put a hyphen in there? but the hyphen.
Have you ever thought about migrating now?
Oh God, no, no. I am not signing my up. I want to do the bare minimum to keep it functioning. But yeah, the .org and the hyphen was like, oh yeah, we'll give this thing to you for a song. So that's why, because I'm cheap. So I always wanted to tell Merv that, but now I guess I'll have to hear it on the podcast. So it was great having you all. Really appreciate it. Thanks for making this as easy as a podcast as it could be without the old big M. And as always, check us out, and everybody have a good night.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.